leadership is just strategy and vision. That's a very linear view. That's the common understanding of leadership, is that leaders set the rules, they set the vision, they set the boundaries, and that's a very linear way to look at leadership. That doesn't talk about CQ, cultural intelligence. It doesn't talk about EQ, emotional intelligence. It doesn't talk about sympathy or empathy. It doesn't talk about communication. And now you could say that communication is part of strategy and part of these things. It's part of it, yes, but it's the minority that most people accept or look at. So when they look at strategy, they're like, oh, we're going to be the biggest, the most valuable company on the planet. Okay, well, how are you communicating that strategically and sustainably? How are you achieving that effectively and efficiently with the people that you have? And like you said, that's a skill to be honed and to work on, which is where people like me and people like you come in to have these conversations.
Hello and welcome back to Leading with Integrity. And this week we are talking about neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion. To help me do that, I'm joined by my guest, Grant Harris. He is a neurodiversity advocate, is an organizational culture specialist, and he works to help companies and public sector organizations save time, keep talent, and deliver value by redesigning how work gets done. He is a consultant, he's a keynote speaker, he talks about neuro-inclusive performance and the future of work. So some really interesting topics there in his area of specialism, and we will be digging into pretty much all of those today as he shares his journey, his own neurodiversity experiences, his insights on leadership and inclusivity in the workplace, and the importance of recognizing and embracing all of these issues, addressing those biases and stigmas, and doing what you can as a leader to foster that culture of understanding and support, the kind of thing we are all about here at Leading with Integrity. And if any of the things that we talk about in today's episode ring a bell, strike a tone, resonate with you, as they say, if any of the challenges we talk about are something that you are facing yourself, I do encourage you, reach out to Grant, have a conversation, learn from his experience, perhaps benefit from his insights and the work that he does. And if you are a new leader and you are struggling with issues like imposter syndrome, low confidence, gaps in your knowledge, or just not knowing where to start as a leader, as a manager of people, then I do encourage you as well. You are invited to come and join us at my Integrity Leaders online community for leaders. It is a leadership safe space where you can talk about any of the challenges, ask any of the questions that you might be afraid to mention at work, share your experiences, learn from each other, get to know other leaders in a similar place in their career journeys as you, all while gaining access to resources, courses, like our new first and second steps leadership courses, which have a very cool space sci-fi theme to them. I think they're cool anyway. Not to mention early access every week to these very podcast episodes. So you get them the week before anyone else and before they go public. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, do visit leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. It is on the screen if you're watching the video, and is in the show notes if you're listening to the audio. So click on that link, visit the website, learn more things, and you will also find that big green sign up button on the homepage too. And I look forward to welcoming you aboard the Starship Integrity as you become a member of our community, our crew, very soon.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Grant, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Lovely to have you on the show today.
Awesome to be here, David. Looking forward to it.
Over to you to start us off, really. Tell us a bit about your career journey so far, what you do today and why you do it.
Yeah, honored to be here. Looking forward to this conversation about leadership. My name is Grant Harris, and I am founder and president of GTH Consulting. I am an organizational culture specialist, a keynote speaker, a 3-time published author, and a neurodiversity champion. And I help business leaders and organizations to save time, keep talent, and grow treasure through the power of neurodiversity from the boardroom to the mailroom. Because, David, I personally believe that when every brain thrives, then we all do. So that's the work that I do, and it's been a long, winding road in order to get there. I am multiple things. I like to call myself an onion without the smell because I have multiple layers like we all do. I was late diagnosed autistic at the age of 38, and most people are diagnosed autistic by the age of 6. So I went most of my life not fully understanding my capabilities from within. And since then, I am also a Hall of Fame athlete. And I once actually memorized the flag of every country in the world by sight because I like flags. And that's the way my brain works. So that's a little bit about what I do. And I'm sure as we go along, we'll dive deeper into it. But that gives you a little snapshot of who I am up front.
Okay. And so you mentioned it was a long and winding road. I mean, what were some of the career highlights? So I know from reading your profile, there's some impressive things on there. So
yeah, well, I've had multiple careers in my day. I've had about 3 or 4 careers. I started out in management consulting. I spent time in education, both K-12 and higher ed. I actually spent time as a special educator teaching autistic kids before I knew I was autistic, which is probably why I had some level of success reaching those particular students, but I didn't know at the time. And then I transitioned into high school and community college, all in leadership roles, serving marginalized, underrepresented, underprivileged populations, either by raising my hand and saying, this is the work that I want to do, or just being in those roles. So through education and entrepreneurship is my third kind of go at life, being an entrepreneur, working with nonprofits and education institutions and for-profits as well, working with senior leaders, hiring managers, supervisors, people leaders, people that are in charge of others, and not only in charge of others, but in charge of themselves and responsible for creating happy and healthy and profitable workplaces. So that's the journey of my where I have come today, and along those paths, I have come across different types of leaders. I've seen different leadership, and that's one point that I want to make with your listeners today, David, is that leadership isn't linear. And I'll say that again, that leadership is not linear. And then the question is, well, what does that mean? And no, linear, a line, either left or right or straight up and down. Straight at the fastest point between to the fastest way to get between point A and point B is what? Straight line, right? Yeah, straight line. But yeah, so, but if you're doing geometry and if you're doing math, maybe so. But in life, it's not always a straight line. In life, people think differently. They show up differently. They have different needs. So leaders can't do it from point A to point B on a straight line. That doesn't get the job done. And unfortunately, that causes inflexible and inefficient and ineffective systems. And that leads to unhappy and unhealthy and unprofitable workplaces, which is the opposite of what it looks like when neurodiversity is done well and received well throughout an organization. So very excited to dig deeper on those topics.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point about it not being linear. I mean, there's an interesting piece there as well. I think that a theme maybe about kind of self-awareness, self-reflection. And I find it quite interesting that you, before realizing you were autistic yourself, you were teaching autistic kids. I mean, were there any clues, or were you just didn't even think about it? It never occurred to you?
Well, it never really occurred to me. Looking back, my wife, then my girlfriend at the time, attempted to bring it up to my family, which at the time wasn't very accepting. I'm the first person in my family to be diagnosed with a disability. I'm the first person in my family to be diagnosed as neurodivergent, and I'm the first person in my family to be diagnosed as autistic. So I didn't grow up with disability in my face or as a part of conversation. Um, in my extended family, people with disabilities, diabetes, and these types of things, but nothing related that I am aware of to any type of cognitive or neurodivergent disability. So being the first, family wasn't always, it's hard to accept those types of conversations at first. However, as an adult and understanding my wife is ADHD and she's known for a long time. So she saw some signs, but no, growing up, did not think anything about being autistic at all. Didn't have autistic friends. I think my grandmother, she was one of like 12 kids. One of her brothers was disabled or autistic when he was born, but he died early at like 2 or 3. So that's the only instance in my family that I'm aware of. And this brings me to another point in terms of being the first and the only, especially being a black male in leadership realms. It is common that leaders across the board who find out about their neurodivergence and the way that they think and operate tend to be isolated. They tend to feel alone. And as a matter of fact, David, upwards of 20% of the working population uh, describes as having daily loneliness. So we have an epidemic of people who are lonely and isolated. And that's not just your frontline worker. That's not just your middle manager. That's all the way up and down the ladder. And that's why I say I have these topics and these conversations from the boardroom to the mailroom, because it impacts all of us. It doesn't matter how young or green you are. It doesn't matter how seasoned you are. Isolation, loneliness is real. And uh, how do we address that? How do we mitigate that? And these are things we'll talk about as we go along. But I want to make those points because it is isolating to be the first and the only to be diagnosed in a family aspect. But you extrapolate that to the workplace, it's the same thing. And my family knows me. They love me. They look like me. They want the best for me, as most families do. But in a workplace, that's not always the case. You have people that don't look like you, that don't think like you, that don't have the same cultural angles and perspectives as you. But then how do we navigate that? And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think loneliness is something that comes up in the leadership sphere as well, particularly for, oddly enough, like the first time leaders when you first step into those shoes. So there's a parallel there too. And if you've got both at the same time where you're struggling with two first things, I can imagine it just being even more compounded. So yeah, I mean, loneliness just generally in society too feels like a hot topic in recent years, especially since sort of pandemic and like literal physical isolation on top of that. And yeah, maybe a downside of remote work too.
It hits everyone, but it hits the neurodivergent population differently and deeper. The neurodivergent population is what we say at the bottom of the totem pole. They are impacted the most because even people with a disability, which is a large umbrella, you have people with disability, but you have people with a visible disability, which they all have their own prejudices and biases against them. But if I can see a person has a disability, then I have the opportunity to meet that person halfway and say, okay, well, you have a disability. I'm going to try to accommodate that in any way, shape, or form that I can, or not. And you have that decision up front because you can see that. But neurodivergent people don't show that up front. You don't know that I'm autistic by just looking at me. And the young boy that doesn't keep eye contact, that's wearing a helmet, that's sitting in the corner by himself, rocking back and forth, that's not the microcosm of autism. And that's me, how I identify. But these microcosms and these stereotypes that you have in neurodivergence, that's when you don't always see that visibly. So then the person that you are working with, or the leader that you are working under, or the leader that you're working side by side with, doesn't see those things. And it comes out as small misunderstandings in terms of miscommunications, in terms of being unclear, and in terms of needing different amounts of time or different amounts of support in different ways. That's how it comes out. But then people look at that as, oh, the person is asking too many questions, which I get a lot. I like asking questions for clarity. Oh, the person's difficult. Oh, this person is a challenge because I have to repeat myself, or they don't respond right away, so therefore they're disengaged. So at that point, you have all those negative stereotypes that people aren't saying, oh, well, this person's brain might operate differently. Versus if they're in a wheelchair, they can see, oh, well, this person can't really do these things because they're in a wheelchair and they need some type of accommodation. But when it comes to the invisible disability, that's a more nuanced conversation.
Do you find there's much of a stigma these days as well with once people do know? Because, I mean, we hear this sort of in the conversation of mental health quite a lot, where it used to be, particularly in the workplace, quite sort of stigmatized, and you didn't mention it because then people, saw less of you. It might impact your chances of promotion or career progression and so on. Do you see similar with neurodiversity, or not so much, or has it got better over time? Something in between? What's been your experience of that?
Yeah, 100%. There are all types of biases and prejudices against. And I want to make sure to your listeners that bias and prejudice in and of themselves are not bad things. Humans need bias and prejudice in different realms in order to survive. It keeps us safe. It lets us know when we should go left or right. The bias and prejudice are not inherently bad. What's bad is when they show up and when they put one person or a group of people over another group of people in some way, shape, or form at an unfair advantage, and then nothing is done about that. That's when bias and prejudice are rearing their ugly head. So when it comes to all the biases and prejudices against neurodivergent people, there's some of the ones that I mentioned before. But a big one is that we're making it up. It's all in our head. It's not a real thing. It's just a preference. It's just a bug that people can work through. And at some point in time, it's a us versus them, meaning from a leadership perspective, how do I get my neurodivergent people to work better and be more effective and efficient? Well, that's an us versus them. And leaders have to understand that, one, you're a person too, and upwards of 20% of the world's population, not just America, not just the UK, the entire globe's population identifies as neurodivergent. And in America, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people are disabled. And if you live long enough, by the age of 75, most people will become disabled at some point in time. So for those people who are looking at neurodiversity as an us versus them, like, that's not me. I don't do that. We have to kind of fix them. It's not a fixing them. And that's one of the things that I talk about in one of my keynotes, is that we're not fixing people. You need to fix your process. Fix the process, not your people. So that's a stigma, that it's something to be fixed. Another stigma, like I said, is it's us versus them. Leaders look at it as if, like, I don't think differently, but these people do. So how do we manage these people in the corner? Well, as a leader, you might think differently yourself. Upwards of 34% of CEOs in America identify as dyslexic. 20 to 25% of Fortune 500 CEOs identify as dyslexic, but that's private. They have those private conversations and they're not public about it because of the stigma, because of being a non-linear thinker, thinking differently. So these are biases and stigmas that still exist. And for leaders in small to medium to large size workplaces, those biases only compound themselves. So that's on the flip side of that, you have these other stigmas or stereotypes that we're all some type of neurodivergent. Oh, we're all a little bit autistic. Oh, everybody has a little bit of ADHD. And that's incorrect, because while we all, I love to say that we all have a brain, but no two brains are alike. So no two brains operate the same, but that doesn't mean that you're neurodivergent in the social ways that are defined, because you are not necessarily feeling the daily impact that other people are feeling. So because you have a peculiarity or a certain way of being and working, that doesn't mean that thing impacts your daily life, your work life, your social life, your health, as a neurodivergent person would, that is either in diagnosis is not required, but it does not impact them on a daily basis. And the people that are impacted on a daily basis are the ones that leaders need to reach out to and work through and work with the most.
Yeah, I think that point around is particularly like bias and prejudice, and then there's where do you draw the line between you're just leveraging your experiences to come to a conclusion in a situation versus you're being inappropriately prejudiced or your bias is skewing your thinking, and where does that line sit? And I feel like a lot of people really struggle with that, particularly in leadership roles, because your experience largely is all you have to go on a lot of the time when you're making a decision. And not everyone, I think, is processing in terms of their own biases or potential for it, and then where that line is for them. So I think that's a great point for working with neurodiverse people, if you're not, but also for just leadership and decision making generally.
Well, I consider this, David, your point about all you have to go on is your experiences. I would consider something else, because it's not, when you're a leader, you don't only have your experience. You have the experiences of all the people around you. You have the experiences of the people that came before you. And those are the experiences that you should be asking about, which is one way that leaders, managers, supervisors, whatever your title may be, people leaders, one way that they can manage or lead better from the front with the neurodivergent population is not relying just on your own experience, and ask more questions and listen more. So ask more questions and make less statements if you are a people leader. So that would be asking your people, how do you work best? What works best for you? How do you think about these types of situations? Opening up those dialogues versus this is what we do here. That's a statement. This is how this process is done. That's a statement. This is what I expect from you. That's a statement. I'm not saying don't have those conversations. I am saying open the aperture and ask more questions and allow people to meet you halfway versus only requiring them to meet 100% of your expectation as a leader. So it's not just about your internal experience. It's about the experiences of others. And the best way, not the best way, there's multiple different ways, but one of the most effective and efficient ways to meet that person in the middle is to ask and open up. In the reverse, if you were that person, if you're the employee, if you're the intern, if you're the seasoned worker, but you're still an individual contributor and you don't have that title, the same goes for you. Make more statements and ask less questions. So make statements about, this is how I think. This is how I approach these types of situations. My brain works like this. That kind of agency helps people talk about being neurodivergent without saying I'm neurodivergent. So this is how I work best. I work best early in the morning. If you want to contact me, email is the best way. If you want to contact me, phone is the best way. So making these declarative statements as an individual contributor, that not necessarily the actual people leader, will help the people leaders understand how you work best without disclosing, without any medical note, doctor's note, without any medical diagnosis. So make more statements if you're that person. And if you're a leader, make less statements and ask more questions. And we both meet in the middle. And ultimately, that leads to what? Happier, healthier, and more profitable workplaces.
Yeah, it's a great point. Absolutely. And I think there's leading with curiosity, of being willing to ask questions without knowing the answers. I think it's very easy, isn't it? We get sort of tied up in our own ideas of what a leader looks like. And I think that leads a lot of people to skip that sort of information gathering phase that should be at the beginning of any real conversation as a leader. And we jump straight to, well, I'm the leader, so I need to show the way, set the policy, whatever. And And whilst that is sort of true, it's not the first step.
Yeah, a couple of things with that, David. Do you know what a leader looks like? The profile of a leader. What does a leader look like? A leader looks like you and looks like me, because we're all leaders.
Absolutely. I'm very much with you there. Yeah.
So a person that doesn't have a leadership title can still be a leader. And a person with a leadership title can be the worst leader in the world. And there's no ideal profile of a leader because they look like you and they look like me. Because the way that I have described leaders meeting non-leaders in the middle of communication, of honesty and truth and trust, that's what real leadership is made of. Not just the person who sets the rules, not just the person who sets the policy. It's the person and the people who set the rules and the policies with the people who are most impacted. That's true leadership. Yeah, I set the rules, I set the policies, but I don't do it in isolation in my office behind a closed door. I do it with and for the people who are most impacted. And if you set the foundation for the people who are most impacted, then everybody else up the chain, from the boardroom to the mailroom, benefits, because this is about everyone benefiting, not just a certain population benefiting. So I want your listeners to understand that just because they might not have a title, that doesn't make them not a leader. And just because you do have a title, that doesn't make you the most effective and efficient leader you can be, because leaders look like all of us, to our left and to our right. And it's our responsibility to make sure that the least of us on paper has the opportunity to do what the most of us on paper has as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's what we perceive a leader looks like, not necessarily what it actually looks like. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that's partly what this podcast is all about. Really, is that anyone can be a leader. Like it's not an inherited right. It's not a born with it trait. It's a skill. It's a set of behaviors. It's something anyone can learn how to do. Just takes a bit of time, bit of openness to learning, bit of concentration, practice till you get good at it. And same as any skill, really. So I'm conscious we've gone straight down a tangent there, which I do love the good tangents, but to bring it back on topic a little bit, we've probably covered quite a few of these already, but what would be your top 3 myths, misconceptions about neurodiversity in the workplace that you would like to challenge? If you haven't already, you may have.
Yeah. One is that neurodiversity needs to be fixed, and people who think differently need to be fixed. That's the opposite. Fix your process, not your people. That's one of the keynotes that I talk about. Fix your process, not your people. That is a big misconception. Another misconception is that neurodiversity is new and novel. Also incorrect. People have long been thinking differently. The first person, it's been 50 years or so since autism, the conversations about autism and what that looks like, and the first person diagnosed was diagnosed. But people have been thinking differently much longer than that. General Patton was thought to be dyslexic. Abraham Lincoln battled depression. There are so many people throughout history that think differently and have been highly successful, not in spite of the way that their brain works, but because of the way that their brain works. And the third is that it's an us versus them, meaning that there are only certain people that think differently. And if you're a leader and you have that title, then that's not you. And they're over there and they need this. And how do I give them what they need? And that might be altruistic. But what leaders need to remember is that you are a person as well, and you most likely think differently. So that's where my race framework comes in, and it's a 4-step framework. And the first step of that is recognize, like, who and where you are. Who are you as a person? Not just focusing on the external as the people that you lead, but how do you think? How do you show up? And how can you communicate that to your people, to your individual contributors, so that they see the example in you and that they feel empowered and encouraged to do the same. So those are three misconceptions, and I talk about two of them in my keynotes. Neurodiversity as the new NEU, the new performance advantage. It's not new in any way, shape, or form. It might be new to you as a person just hearing it for the first time, but it's not new. And fixing the process, not your people, is my number one. People who think differently do not need to be fixed. The inefficient, ineffective systems, policies, and practices is what needs to be fixed.
Yeah. I mean, you said it earlier, like everyone thinks a little bit differently. We all see the world through the lens of our experiences, what we've grown up with, what we were born with, what we've learned in the workplace, the other people we've encountered along the way. And I think it's very tempting. It's very reductive in like any of these sort of diversity categories, like not just neurodiversity, but to just put people in boxes based on where you think they sit and then treating them as a whole group or class of people. And I've always been, from a leadership perspective, very much an advocate of you, as you said already, ask the questions, have those conversations early when you start working with people, like how do you work best? What are you looking for in terms of career, in terms of reward? How best do you communicate? What should I be doing? What shouldn't I be doing? Asking these kinds of questions, like regardless of what you do or don't know about these individuals at the beginning. And you don't have to ask them about any of these things then, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable sharing it. So they much rather, like you said, talk about it in terms of I work best in the morning or the afternoon or whatever. And then they don't have to give away anything that they don't want to then. And you don't have to sort of force things out of them. And if you get it right, it can just be almost like a nice chilled conversation over coffee or something. And there's no real pressure on either side of it. And I don't really, like I sort of understand, but then I also don't understand why so many leaders take the wrong path on this and just try to have that sort of old school understanding of fairness where everyone's treated the same, because it demonstrably doesn't work. And yet people still get stuck in that mindset.
Yeah. You made a point, and everyone treated the same. So, for example, we all have eyes, right? Everybody has eyes, but you and I, we wear glasses. So we aren't treated the same when it comes to our vision as another person who doesn't need glasses. And we have this accommodation called glasses, because glasses is an accommodation. But does that give you or me an unfair advantage in the workplace because we wear glasses in order to see? No, it doesn't. Nobody is fighting a culture war over people wearing glasses, but they get up in arms, they get confused, they get scared, they get anxious when they start talking about accommodations and how we work with people in the workplace, which is why I say we don't even go to accommodations yet. We don't even need to get there. You can make adjustments. There are adjustments in the workplace that don't need to be formalized, that don't have legal standing, but they do have social standing, and they do have trustworthy standing. And all of those things, and many of those things, can be implemented in the workplace before you get to a formal accommodations process. So that's an example of looking at an accommodation, looking at fairness, and saying, oh, well, we all have eyes, we all see, but we all see differently, and we have different needs. You and I have different needs than a sighted person that has better vision than we do. But it's not an unfair advantage for us to wear glasses. It's not an unfair advantage for a person who works best in the morning to be given most of their assignments in the morning so they can be productive, versus waiting until 4 or 5 o'clock to hit them with something, an important task, when they're drained, their brain is not working, etc., and vice versa. So that's not an unfair advantage. That's getting the most and the best out of your people and understanding how they operate within the system to be effective and efficient, not just productive. Productive isn't the goal, David. A lot of people are productive and then they die very quickly on the job because they produced so much in a short period of time. And that happens a lot for neurodiverse people. because especially ADHD folks and creatives, they can create all of this massive output and massive result in a short period of time. But some leaders will take advantage of that and say, "Oh, David, he's got it. Like, give him all this, and I know he's going to turn it out." But that leads to burnout. That leads to resentment. That leads to exhaustion. All of these things, and then you have an unhealthy workplace. And when it's unhealthy, it leads to being unhappy. And when it's unhappy and unhealthy, it leads to being unprofitable. So these are things we're talking about, the aspects of leadership that leaders need to be thinking about from a process perspective and from a systems perspective. So it's not just about productivity, it's about being effective and efficient and leading to saving time, keeping talent, and ultimately growing the treasure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point about sustainability as well, in the context of like the burnout and short-term productivity gains versus long-term losses. I think that if you think about like what the purpose of a leader is as well, for me, I like to think about it in terms of it's creating the environment for others to succeed. And then you've got to define that success, haven't you? But, you know, so I think a big part of that is like long-term and sustainable over time. But if you think about it in that sort of term, then you have to meet people as individuals and understand their individual needs in order to create that environment for each one of them to succeed. Because blanket rules for a whole group of very different people is never going to work. Or at least in this day and age, I don't think it's going to work. Like back in the days where everyone worked in a factory and it was about consistency of output and time spent working, then yeah, maybe back then it was okay and it sort of functioned.
Yeah.
But these days, I think, you know, that's the economy by and large has moved on beyond that. And then the last thing I'll say, the glasses example, I'm not sure, because the purpose of glasses is to bring everyone up to that standard level, isn't it? So it is kind of fixing the kind of the shortfall in our eyesight. I don't know if that's the if that reads across to if you see what I mean. So, I mean, granted though, for a lot of people who wear glasses, that is probably not giving them perfect eyesight or even comparable to their colleagues who don't. But yeah, I don't know. Not sure about that analogy.
Well, that's fair, and I appreciate that pushback. I would say two things. One, example. And two, one, that was an example. And two, glasses, like you said, do not fix our eyesight. It gives us a better opportunity to see better and do better. Even with glasses, because I asked my eye doctor, I was like, well, even with this, is my vision ever going to be perfect, so to speak? He said, no, the only way to get that is LASIK, which is a surgical operation. But it gives us the opportunity to do and be our best. And that's what the idea is, giving everyone the opportunity to do and be their best. If we don't give each other, if we don't give people the opportunity to do and be their best, then they are operating already at a deficit. So glasses inherently don't really fix our vision. It helps us see better so that we have clarity, which is the point. Clarity in communication and understanding. So if we have clarity of a goal, if we have clarity of what that success is, which I do agree, there's individual success, which has to be defined by each person in each relationship. However, there is universal design. And the universal design is that we all have the tools and the resources that we need in order to achieve at our highest, whatever that may be, which is different for every person. But if every person is achieving at their highest and at their greatest for that sustainable time, then that's how you achieve the ultimate outcome, which is happier and healthier and more profitable workplaces.
Yeah, fair enough. You've hinted a bit at your process and the work that you do. Can you tell us a bit more about it and how this approach helps leaders, helps their companies maximize things like success, like outputs, even profits, but do so by leveraging the individual power and advantages of their team, whether they're neurodivergent or not, I guess?
So the race framework I mentioned briefly, but I can dive into it deeper. So RACE, recognize who and where you are as a leader. And this is not just for leaders. It's also for anyone within the organization. But recognize who and where you are. Who are you? What are your values at the core? What's your personal mission? Why are you here? Why are you working with this organization? Why do you do the work that you do? That's the first question. And then where are you on your journey? We're all different parts of our journey. Some of us are novices when it comes to this information. Some of us are living as neurodivergent people. So we're all on a different journey, and we need to understand where we are and then ultimately where we want to go in order to get 1% better on that journey. So it starts with recognition. Then acknowledge. And as leaders and non-leaders as well, we need to acknowledge our intent and our impact. Leaders intend to do lots of good things. They intend to, when they make statements about we're going to donate money here, or we're going to show up this in the marketplace, they intend to do good things, but that intent doesn't always follow through to a positive impact on the people who are impacted the most, which 9 times out of 10, it happens to be neurodivergent people. So you may intend to say something good or do something good. That policy had a good intention, but it landed flat because the impact was it's not as neuro-inclusive as it could be. It's missing people. It's ineffective or inefficient in some way, shape, or form. So the impact was incongruent. And you have to acknowledge that. Leaders have to acknowledge, well, I meant this, but this was the outcome, and this is where I fell short, and this is how I'm going to make up that ground. So acknowledging your intent and your impact. Next is C, which is cultivate. Cultivate is where you're gathering tools, information, education, resources. This is where you're learning and diving deeper, professional development, having people like me come in, keynote speakers, listening to podcasts to get a different perspective and a different angle on things that you thought you knew about yourself and things that you thought you knew about others. So you have to cultivate that. That doesn't happen overnight. None of this happens overnight. Leaders didn't get where they are last week to now. This quantum leap, it doesn't happen that way. And this process is cyclical. So you need to cultivate that education and those knowledge. Seek out conversations with people that don't look like you, don't think like you, don't feel like you, have different experience. But that's difficult to do unless you go through the other steps of recognition and acknowledgement. You can't immediately start going and having a different conversation because you don't have that tool, so you haven't done that work to receive that information. And then the last step is E, engage. I'm a doer. I'm a practitioner. I'm not a researcher. Part of what I do, I research things that happen throughout history, but I'm a doer at heart. I like to get in, work with people, work with organizations, try it, see if it works, fix it, etc. So you have to engage as a leader. How are you engaging? How are you acting? You can do all the thinking. You should think. I think people don't think enough. I think people should think about their thinking more often. I think about my thinking a lot. How am I thinking? People don't do that often enough. But that's only one step. You can't stop at just thinking. You have to move through to engage. You have to meet people where they are. And you have to go and have that conversation. You have to resurface that policy. You have to be vulnerable in the team meeting. So you need to engage once you have cultivated the tools and the knowledge and the resources. Once you have acknowledged your intent versus your impact. Once you have done the self-reflection of understanding who you are and where you are in your journey, you have to engage. You have to do. You have to act at the end of the day. Because that's how you move from point A to point B. That's how you get 1% better as a leader. That's how you get 1% better as an organization. And ultimately, that's how you save time, keep talent, and grow treasure.
Yeah, I think particularly on that last point, that sort of the incremental movement, the incremental change is really important. I think we get, again, one of the kind of challenges with leadership is it leads you down that path of big thinking and big ideas and grand visions, grand goals, like the inspirational future, all of which are great. And it's lovely to think about those, but also it can be really daunting once you've got that massive idea. Okay, how do I actually implement that? How do I execute? And so that secondary ability almost to kind of break the big thing down into achievable smaller parts and then actually act and help people take steps towards that future goal. And the communication around that and the ongoing sort of enthusiasm, motivation, inspiration, all of that is to me, that's the really interesting part of leadership. Because I think, I don't want to say it's easy, but a lot of people are capable of coming up with those big ideas. They're usually not so good at the making them happen, though.
Yeah, and several of the things that we've talked about today are simple in nature, but they are not easy. It's simple to ask a question, but it's not easy to ask a question from the right perspective and with the right mindset. It's easy to say, hey, I meant for this to happen in a good way, but something bad happened. That's easy, but it's not simple, because you have to admit fault. You have to admit there's a chink in the armor as a leader. So these things are simple, but they're not always easy. But as a leader, you sign up for, you sign up to do the hard things. And if you're a leader without that title, you sign up to do the hard things because you're part of the human experience, which neurodiversity is a part of the human experience. So we all, by nature, sign up to do the hard things. We do them in different ways. Some of us get paid more to do those hard things than others. But at the end of the day, we all have to do those hard things. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's not as, it's very simple, but it's not always easy.
No, you're so right. That simple but not easy is a bit of a mantra of leadership, isn't it? I think it's the intention, and the intent behind things definitely matters. I think leaders should be trying to do the right things, the good things, the ethical things. But I think that you're absolutely right as well. Like when the best of intentions doesn't result in the best outcome, how you handle that is perhaps one of the biggest tests of any leader. And we've got plenty of examples in recent history, haven't we, of people being quite bad at that.
Yeah, that's the mark of a leader. I'm not following the leader that says, let's go up the hill. Okay, we go up the hill. Well, I meant to get up that hill because at the top, I saw that we're going to achieve all of our goals and dreams when we get to the top. But along the way, you got all these obstacles, and then you find out that it's not a hill. You find out it's a sinkhole. And it's like, okay, you thought this was a hill, but it's actually a sinkhole. And you'd be like, oh, well, I thought it was a hill, and just leave it at that. No, you'd be like, well, yeah, I thought it was a hill, and it's actually a sinkhole. And half my people now are injured. Half my people now are burned out. And I did that. And I'm going to be the first one trying to find out how I can rectify it. And I'm going to do that with you, not just how I think it should be rectified, because you were the people that got most affected. So I'm going to go to the people who are most affected and ask them and sit with them and be with them to say, okay, this is what you thought was going to happen. This is what actually happened. Where did we miss? And you were the most impacted. So I need to work with you first and deeper and most, and then get all the other people along the way. So that's the mark of true leadership, in my opinion, is not making the statement, making the goal, and saying this is the grand vision. And I don't want to say anybody can do that. Not everybody can do that. But also, not everybody can make that honest and truthful sentiment to say, this was my intent, but this is my impact, and this is how we're going to fix that. And again, the most impacted people in the workplace, wherever you look, the data and the research will tell you that the most impacted people are neurodivergent people. They get the short end of the stick. They don't get the recognition. They don't get the awareness. They get most of the stigma and most of the bias, and other people do too. But I'm saying this is where most of it lies, in the people who are most impacted. So that's where true leadership arises, in my opinion.
Yeah, the more I think about it, like that's sort of the vision, inspiration, the strategy piece. I feel like it's a useful skill for leaders to have, but I don't think it's necessarily actually leadership. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm going to keep thinking about that.
Well, that's what we're here for, David. That's why the podcast exists and these conversations exist. And this has been an excellent one.
Yeah. So, I mean, you think about sort of like the traditional definitions of leadership. It's like strategy and vision are usually pretty high up the list, aren't they? But I don't know. Like, the more I think about it, the less convinced I am. I think leadership is more about achieving whatever that strategy and vision is. I don't think the leader necessarily, I mean, they should probably have a part in it, I suppose, out of like common sense and sense checking. But I don't know that's necessarily a leadership skill so much as just a skill.
Well, again, that's a linear view of leadership is just strategy and vision. That's a very linear view. And I'm not saying that's the view you have, but that's the common understanding of leadership is that leaders set the rules, they set the vision, they set the boundaries. And that's a very linear way to look at leadership. That doesn't talk about CQ, cultural intelligence. It doesn't talk about EQ, emotional intelligence. It doesn't talk about sympathy or empathy. It doesn't talk about communication. And now you could say that communication is part of strategy and part of these things. It's part of it, yes, but it's the minority that most people accept or look at. So when they look at strategy, they're like, oh, we're going to be the biggest, the most valuable company on the planet. Okay, well, how are you communicating that strategically and sustainably? How are you achieving that effectively and efficiently with the people that you have? And like you said, that's a skill to be honed and to work on, which is where people like me and people like you come in to have these conversations. And it's one thing to have the vision. It's another thing to be able to execute that. And it's another thing to be able to execute that with fidelity over time and understanding that it is not going to be linear. It's going to be an up and down. It's going to be a left and right because that's how people think and that's how people operate. And that's not just because I say so. That's just a human experience in and of itself. And if you are not operating that way at this point in time, you are losing. You as a leader, you are losing and you are behind. You as an organization, you are losing and you are behind. We talk about the future of work. A lot of people say neurodiversity is the future of work. I disagree with that. I say neurodiversity is the now of work. It's not just the future. Neurodiversity has been around for a very long time. 30 to 40% of the current workforce self-describes as neurodivergent. And I think you could double that because there's a large portion of people that are still hesitant about self-identifying. So you're looking at a large portion of the workforce, and that's not even talking about Gen Z, which is over half of Gen Z, which is the future workforce, is public and identifies as being some type of neurodivergent. So these types of things, if you as an organization are lagging, you are seriously, your competition is already beating you. And as an individual leader, you and your career trajectory is at risk if you are choosing in any way, shape, or form to stay in a linear path of leadership, because leadership is not linear. And that's not a knock on anybody that's on this podcast. And I don't know who your listeners are individually, but I do know that they describe themselves as leaders. And if they want to stay leaders and if they want to be the most effective and efficient leaders that they can be, then they need to understand the concept of that the leadership is not linear. It's not just point A to point B. There's a lot that happens in between. And if you meet those people where they are, then you will achieve, in my opinion, you will achieve the highest level of leadership possible, title or no.
Yeah, no, very well put. Very well put. The statistics, of course, also don't account for the people who don't know yet either.
Correct.
Correct. Given your own experience, I mean, there could be loads of those in their late 30s as it is. So,
and in my opinion, if you ask me, the common stat, like I mentioned earlier, is 20% of the global population. I say double that, easily double that. The combination of bias, the combination of not knowing, of the unknown, the combination of prejudice and all of that. There are many people around the world and here in America and the UK and in our workplaces that don't think linearly. And they just either don't know it yet or they do know and they don't want to share it because they think that they're going to be negatively impacted. And that's my mission is to help leaders and organizations understand this and help them become nonlinear thinkers themselves, even if they don't self-describe that way, so that ultimately they can save time and they can keep that talent and they can grow whatever treasure that they have decided that they're going after. That's my mission and my goal.
Yeah, and it's an important one, 100%. What would be the best piece of advice you could offer for a manager who is leading a neurodiverse person for the first time?
Yeah, I think we covered it a little bit earlier, and it's simple but not easy. But ask more questions and make less statements. Ask more questions. Ask people what they need. Be more in tune to other people instead of just the mission of the organization. Instead of just having people acclimate to you as the leader and meet you where you are as the leader. Good leaders meet their people where they are, or at least they try. If they can't fully, they try. So ask more questions. And those questions, like we mentioned earlier, what works best for you? What does success look like for you? How do you work best? When do you work best? What can I do for you? What do you need from me? If you ask any of those questions as a leader, you're going to surprise your employee more often than not, because they're not expecting that. They're expecting a leader to set the agenda. They're expecting the leader to say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is what I expect from you. This is what you should do. They're expecting all of those statements to be put at them more often than not. So if you're a leader, I encourage you to pick one or two of those questions that I mentioned in your next one-to-one meeting, in your next team meeting, and open the aperture and ask one more question than you did before, and do the same the following week, and do the same the following week. So it's about 1% better, Dave. It's not about make these huge jumps. It's not about that. It's about 1% better. So ask one more question tomorrow than you did yesterday, or that you did the following week, and then you'll build this habit of meeting people where they are. That's my biggest and I think the most effective and efficient way for leaders to meet their people halfway is to ask more questions, make less statements.
I don't know about you, but growing up, there was that mantra that we were always taught, like, treat others how you want to be treated. And I've found in more recent years a really powerful reframe on that, which I think is pertinent here, is treat others how they want to be treated, how they want to be treated, not how you would want to be in their shoes, because you're not in their shoes. You don't know.
Correct.
And I think in order to be able to do that, as we've said, you've got to ask them, like, how do you want to be treated? Unless you're a mind reader. I mean, maybe there are a few in the world. Who knows?
I mean, do you prefer email or do you prefer a phone call? Do you prefer a phone call or do you prefer text? Do you want all the detail up front or do you want just bullets? Like, and as a leader, when you start doing that, David, your work will become more seamless, more effortless over time, because you're giving the people what they need at that moment to get from point A to point B the most effective, like the fastest way. So if David tells me, yeah, I like bullets, and then I send you a paragraph, you're not going to be able to operate that way, or vice versa. So I tell people I like, just give me bullets. That's all I need. And, 2 or 3 bullets and I can go from there, versus 2 or 3 paragraphs, which saves time. And then it shows the individual contributor that the leader is really trying to meet them halfway. And then you can move faster that way. So yeah, that's definitely my advice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we probably don't have time to get into like the workplace culture implications of the fact that people are still going to be surprised when you ask them these questions. But I do think there is a perhaps secondary and added benefit of doing this is that you will make those people feel valued and seen and listened to, which again will deliver extra benefits, because people who feel valued and heard and listened to tend to put more effort in, work harder, be more invested in the success of what you need them to do. So, there's so many reasons why these are good ideas.
Yeah, agreed. Well, one, I would love to come back for part 2 and have that conversation. I'm certainly open to that. And two,
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
even if you feel heard and you feel seen, you feel valued, even if you don't get what you want, even if there's disagreement, even if you say, hey, like, I think we should do X, but the company ends up doing Y, but at least they asked you what you wanted at the beginning. And if you don't get what you wanted at the beginning, they should communicate why, and they should be honest about that. And people resonate with that versus, well, we're just going to do this and I never asked you. And then we're going to do it and I never told you why. Just like raising kids. I have 3 kids. Like, gotta tell them why, so excellent. So yes, I certainly would love to have that deeper conversation about how that affects the workplace and a follow up. But this has been an excellent conversation, David. You've been an excellent host. I appreciate the opportunity and the time.
Oh, well, thank you. I do have one final question for you because everyone has to answer this one. So it's leadership heroes.
Leadership heroes.
If you had to pick one person, but it could be literally anyone you could think of, so they could be alive or dead, past or present, real or even fictitious, if you like, who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be for you and why?
No celebrities. I'm not into celebrities or big names. I'm not going to throw out Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln. Like, those people had an effect on society, but didn't have a direct effect on me in the moment. A person who had a direct effect on me. I attended military school and an ROTC program. I had an ROTC instructor who is still a mentor for me today. And he was a leader because, one, he always respected me. I felt like he always respected me as a person. He always had my best interest at heart. And he also showed on many occasions his faults and his fears. He was very transparent with that. And we've commiserated over the years on his journey, and he shared his journey with me. So it's not all like, I'm the mentor. I'm going to show you all the good things about life, and you should do everything that I did. Well, he's like, I failed at this, and this was hard, and I'm struggling with this. And he gave me the opportunity to mentor him in certain ways. So that type of reciprocal leadership for me has been most impactful. So I would say my ROTC instructor from my military college days was one of the best examples of leadership that comes to mind for me.
Wow, that's very cool. Especially because in that sort of context and situation, it would be very easy for someone to maybe not abuse their authority, but certainly have that very one-directional linear view of it. Probably would have been quite unusual, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the best mentors are always the ones who are like, they offer you the benefit of their experience and you can learn from them, but also they show that bit of vulnerability and they're not above learning from you in return. They're quite rare to find those sort of people, I think.
Agree.
I think we've both been fortunate there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Grant, thank you so much for being with us today. Last thing I will ask you, if anyone in the audience wants to learn more about you, the work you do, perhaps get a hold of one of those books, where can they go? What's the website and so on?
Yeah, certainly. Again, my name is Grant Harris, and I believe that when every brain thrives, we all do. So if you're a people leader and you are tired of wasting time, of losing talent, and of falling profits, then you can DM me T Factor. The T Factor, time, talent, and treasure. T Factor on LinkedIn at Grant Harris 555, and I will send you a 10% off discount code to my self-paced Neurodiversity in the Workplace course that is built in partnership with the largest disability job board in America. So again, DM T Factor to Grant Harris 555 on LinkedIn. And again, my name is Grant Harris. Thank you, David.
Lovely. Well, I will make sure that link goes in the show notes somewhere so everyone can find it easily as well. Well, thank you again for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Grant, thank you again for your conversation and your time today. I genuinely found that really interesting to hear your experiences, particularly with finding out you had autism. That was quite a unique experience there, I think, given the stage in life that it happened. But there were so many great insights and great lessons that can be drawn from those experiences and from the rest of your career and the work that you do. So thank you for being so open with us. Thank you for sharing with the audience and with me as well. I'm sure everyone found it just as interesting as I did. Listener, viewer, if you would like to learn more about Grant, if you would like to have a conversation with him about neuro-inclusion, you'll find his website details and other links down in the show notes. So as I say every week, pretty much, click on the things, learn the stuff. Do reach out to him. I'm sure he would love to hear from you. And don't forget, come and visit us as well at leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Sign up for the Integrity Leaders community. As a podcast listener, you will benefit from an exclusive 50% off discount, the code for which is on the screen and in the show notes. That will give you 50% off for the entire time that you remain a member, whether it's a month or several years. Either way, you'll get 50% off forever. And if you would like to learn more about the community, or if you have questions before you join, you'll also find my LinkedIn profile down there. Connect, drop me a message. Let's talk leadership. That's all I have time for this week. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you'll return again next week when we have a returning guest from 2 or 3 years ago, Mr. Jay Williams. He is a corporate behavioral strategist. He's also a speaker and an excellent podcast guest. And we'll be talking about his new framework for leadership, which revolves around the 3 A's. So tune in next week to find out what those 3 A's are. And until then, as always, be a leader, not a boss.